this session is truly a global one. We have attendees from the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Philippines, Indonesia, South Africa, UAE, Qatar, basically all across the world. A big shout out to all the folks who are joining from different time zones as well. For some of us, it's midnight. For a few of you, it's early morning. So again, thank you so much for joining in. This session has a diversified audience. We have small and medium businesses, startups to corporates across India. We have guests from the Aditya Birla Group, Mahindra, Hyundai, Dun & Bradstreet, and a lot more. So here's the agenda. We will have the speaker address us, post which we will have a curated Q&A session with some of the special guests who've joined us. And then we'll open the floor for questions from the audience. If you've joined us as a panelist, I request you to kindly mute yourself and turn off the video. We want the limelight only on the speaker to start with. Okay, as everyone said, the topic for today's discussion is very interesting. It is going to be on innovation in customer experience, the post-COVID-19 strategy. And let me give you a little introduction about our speaker. In fact, we are so privileged to have him join us here today. He's recognized as one of the world's leading authorities on customer-focused business strategies. He co-founded the management consulting firm Peppers & Rogers Group. His new company, CX Speakers, delivers workshops, keynote presentations, and thought leadership consulting on customer experience topics. An acclaimed author, Don Peppers, with his business partner, Dr. Martha Rogers, has written 9 international bestsellers that collectively has sold over 1 million copies in 18 languages, including the One-to-One Future, which Business Week called the Bible of the New Marketing. Prior to founding CX Speakers and Peppers & Rogers Group, Peppers has served as the CEO of a top 20 direct marketing agency, worked as an economist in the oil industry, and as an accounting director for a regional airline. Today, he's one of the widely read LinkedIn influencers on the topic of customer experience with over 320,000 followers. He describes himself as the fun guy, and just make sure you don't get on the wrong side when it comes to customers. All right, with that, folks, if you're excited about today's session, type excited in the chat box. Let's build some energy for the amazing gentleman who's going to come over and address us. So go ahead and type excited. Okay, I see so many D's in the excited as well. Great. I think the audience is set. With a huge round of applause. I know I won't be able to hear you, but we will still give the speaker a huge round of applause. Please welcome Mr. Don Peppers. Over to you.
Thank you, Anmol. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Everything
yes,
okay?
Don, all clear.
Oh, okay, great. Well, I am delighted to be here, and or to metaphorically be there, right? I want to talk to you about a sea change in the way marketing has evolved over just the last 20 years. You know, in 1980, the market capitalization of the Standard & Poor's 500 companies, the S&P 500, their total market capitalization was 100% explained by tangible tangible assets, inventories, products, factories, equipment. But in 2010, 30 years later, less than 40% of the market cap of the S&P 500 was in tangible assets, and over 60% was in intangible assets. And what were those intangible assets? Mostly, in accounting terms, they were expressed as goodwill. What that meant was companies had bought other companies for a lot more than their tangible assets were worth, and the excess was termed goodwill on their balance sheet. But what it stood for fundamentally was the value of these companies' customers. I just want you to think about this for a second, because going from 0% to 60% in terms of valuing customers as a primary business asset is quite a sea change in the business world. And just think about companies like Apple or Google. Google does not have $500 billion worth of ping pong tables and cafeteria trays in their corporate headquarters. It doesn't have factories, and it's got a few server farms and things. Yes, it has billions of dollars of assets, but not $500 billion worth of property. What it has is $500 billion worth of customer goodwill, customer intentions to buy in the future. Fundamentally, what's happened in the last 20 years is that because of technology, businesses have begun competing in a different dimension of competition. You could visualize it this way. There are two things that a business has to do to be able to compete. It has to be able to satisfy some need, and it has to have a customer who wants to have that need satisfied. Now, I could pursue my strategy two different ways. I could focus on one particular need that I meet really well. I have a particular product that meets a certain need. I could try to find as many customers who I can who want to have that need met. That's the product-driven marketing dynamic. Or I could focus on one customer at a time. And by interacting with that customer individually and customizing my behavior toward that particular customer, I could try to meet as many of that customer's needs as possible over the entire lifetime of the customer's patronage with me and across all my different products and divisions. And not just the customer, but his family members, his coworkers, people he refers to me. And if I'm competing in the product dimension, I am competing to try to improve my share of market. But if I'm competing in the customer dimension, I'm trying to improve my share of customer. Instead of trying to maximize the value of each of my products creates individually with product managers and brand managers and so forth, instead, I'm trying to maximize the value that each of my customers creates. And I have account managers or customer portfolio managers. I have other functionaries in my business who are accountable for the value created by my customers. And the result in the digital economy is that the successful companies that now dominate the S&P 500 have all adopted this business model. They're all trying to create businesses based on maximizing the value their customers create, not just the value their products create. These two kinds of competition, they don't really conflict with each other, except that you have different objectives. If you're a product-centric competitor, your objective is to maximize the value your product creates. If you're a customer-centric competitor, you maximize the value each customer creates. Just think about this for a second, because I want you to think about how customers create value for a business. Well, there are several ways. Obviously, the customer buys something and he pays you money. That creates value. He costs money to serve, right? You have to serve, you have to create service for him, whatever. But the customer also has a brain and a memory. And unlike a product, a customer remembers you from this time to the next time. And when you treat the customer really well this time, his intention to buy in the future increases. You could think of a customer as like a little bundle of cash flow with a memory. Yeah. Products don't remember you. They have no brains. You could treat a product as mean as you want, and it's still going to be worth the same thing tomorrow. But you can't treat a customer badly and expect that they're going to create the same amount of value for you next time. Now, I've done a lot of thinking about how businesses value their customers. And there are a lot of different ways it could be done. I'll give you an example. Speedy Car Wash in Pensacola, Florida. The owner of that car wash talked to me at a conference once, and he said that at his car wash, the cashier writes down the license plate numbers of all the cars that go through the car wash. I said, oh, that's interesting. Well, what do you do that for? He said, well, every month or two, we tally up all the license plates and we rank order them by how frequently we've seen them, okay? And we publish a top 50 customer license plates list. We put it on the employee bulletin board. Here are our top 50 customers by the frequency with which their license plates have come through the car wash. And he said, every day, the first employee who spots a top 50 customer's license plate and calls out, I give him $10. So all my workers have memorized the license plates of the top 50 customers. And what that means is that I am ranking my customers by value. I'm treating the very best customers a little better than the others. I'm singling them out. I'm remembering them. That's what I would call a proxy value for customer value, okay? Proxy value is a substitute value. If you ran the direct mail business back in the 70s and 80s, you used the RFM model. That's recency, frequency, and monetary value. And it was like counting license plates, but you did it for your direct marketers. Airlines count how many miles you take. Hotels count how many hotel rooms you stay in. What they're all trying to get at is they're trying to rank their customers by value. Now, if you did it truly, rank them by value, you'd have to define what the value of the customer is. And the value of a customer fundamentally is frequently called the lifetime value. It's the discounted net present cash flow that you expect from the customer, knowing what you know now, doing nothing different on your part. This is what you expect the customer to generate for you in the future. But of course, the future is changeable because, you know, I could change the customer's behavior, couldn't I? What if I tick him off and he doesn't buy any more from me? What if I delight him and he buys? What's the maximum amount I could get that customer to buy? I call that the potential lifetime value. What's the maximum amount of patronage we could get from a customer if, through conscious action on our part, we treat him special, we give him relevant offers, we're very careful, we earn his trust, we make an emotional connection with the customer. What's the maximum value? That's the potential value. And if you divide actual value over potential value, that is your share of customer. Now, the fact that there are two ways you can define customer value gives an interesting perspective on the kinds of strategies that you can apply. And I'm going to share a screen and show you a chart. Hang on a minute. Right here. Okay, you're seeing this chart? What I've got is the chart on the right side. I've got up the vertical axis is how much unrealized potential value do I have? And across the horizontal axis is how much actual value do I have? And on the far lower right corner, what you have is your most valuable customers, your MVCs. These are customers that have a lot of actual value to. They're worth a lot of money, but they don't have a lot of growth potential. And over on the left side, I call them most valuable customers, MVCs. And you have a different objective for these customers. You want to retain them. You use account management to reinforce each customer's behavior, especially during the pandemic. You can't afford to lose your MVCs during the pandemic. In the upper left-hand corner, these are customers you need to invest in. These are most growable customers. These customers don't have a lot of value now, but they have a lot of potential, unrealized potential. They could be big customers. A lot of times, these customers are your competitors' most valuable customers. And so with these customers, you want to invest to increase your share of customer. And you want to differentiate customers by their needs so that you can better appeal to them. In the upper right-hand quadrant, you have the super growth customers. And super growth customers have high actual value and high potential value. So most consumer businesses don't have very many, super growth customers, but B2B companies frequently have super growth customers. You may be a B2B company and Microsoft may be a very valuable customer, but they could be 100 times bigger, let's say. That's a super growth customer, for instance. And there you want to retain them and invest. It's a lower left-hand quadrant that you have low maintenance customers. These customers aren't worth very much, but there's a lot of them, okay? So you streamline and automate your services and resources. You reduce your cost to serve, but you make it, and you emphasize economy, especially during the pandemic and the economic downturn that we're facing now. You try to streamline everything, automate stuff. And then in the lower left, you have a slice of customers that almost every company has. And these are customers who don't create any value for you today and probably never will. And these are what I call below zeros, BZs. I used to call them bozos, all right? A below zero customer, you know, during the pandemic, you should fire these customers. You don't need to do business. Why do businesses do business with customers that you'll never make money on? You know, the reason is because they don't know that they're not making money on them. You should revise your value propositions. You should start charging for some of the services that these customers are taking for free. So these are strategies. Now, the thing is, these are real figures here. At Peppers & Orange Group, one of our B2B clients, we did a graph of all of their customers in terms of their unrealized potential and their actual value. And you can see my arrow here. Over here on the far right, you have the most valuable customers. You have a few super growth customers here. Up here, you have the most growable customers. And again, these, by the way, if you look at the graph, the scale here is about 1/10 the size. This is a very tall bar, okay? It's not drawn to scale. It's a very, very tall bar. These are this company's competitors' most valuable customers. And down here, you even have a few below zero customers. So your goal is to use the pandemic to begin changing the mix of your customers. If you think of the array of your customers, if I put them on a chart with the number of customers graphed against your actual lifetime value, this is the way that chart would look. It looked like a kind of a modified bell curve. It's called it actually be a Poisson curve mostly, but it's kind of a skewed bell curve. And guess what? Over on the left-hand side, you have your below zeros. The 0 point is right there. You have below zero customers. And in the upper right, you have your most valuable customers. Now, if you practice your normal marketing, then when you acquire more customers, you will not change the mix of your customers. If you apply a simple product-based market share strategy, you can increase the number of customers, and that does increase the value you're creating, but it doesn't shift the mix of your customers. Instead, you want to apply a share of customer strategy. And apply a customer strategy, you shift the whole curve over. And when you shift that curve over, you increase the number of MVCs and you reduce the number of BZs. And that's changing the mix. Okay. Now, there are a couple other issues I want to talk about, and one has to do with the way you get data for your customers. There are a lot of companies out there trying to do business by being more customer-centric, and in most cases, they're measuring their success in terms of customer centricity. They're measuring it with voice of customer surveys, and there's nothing wrong with the voice of customer survey, really. As long as you know its limitations. There's no better source for the quality of a customer experience you're delivering than the customer himself or herself, okay? You get them telling you this was good or this was bad. But you also have to remember that customers are subjective. They're human. Their opinions go up and down with the tide of public sentiment and their regional affiliations, their previous experience. There's a whole field of behavioral economics that deals with the emotions and the irrational impulses of individual customers. Think of it this way. Imagine you had two people, Alice and Bob, and they're each worth $1 million today. Now, an economist would say these two people must be equally happy with their lives. But what if I told you that yesterday Alice was only worth $500,000, and today she's worth $1 million. And yesterday, Bob, he was worth $2 million, but today he's only worth $1 million. Now, do you think they're equally happy? Of course not. Okay. And when you ask a customer, how satisfied were you with our brand, or how likely on a scale of 1 to 10 would you be to recommend us to a competitor? Their question is relative to what? The last company I dealt with, my life in general? Let me give you an example of how a company fell adrift. It was an actual client, Gopal and mine. And I'm going to share my screen again in a minute. I'm here. Okay. And I'm going to go to here. One of the largest telecom firms at a major country, English-speaking country, they rewarded their senior executives based on NPS, Net Promoter Score. I don't know if well, I'm sure most of you have heard of Net Promoter Score. It's a famous Fred Reichheld championed single question that answers a lot of issues, like on a score of 1 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend us to a friend? And if you're a 9 or a 10, you're a promoter. If you're a 6 or below, you're a detractor. You subtract the percentage of people who answer 6 or below from the percentage of people who answer 9 or 10, and that's your Net Promoter Score. And the higher the score is, the better you, and the score can vary, therefore, from minus 100 to plus 100. That's the range. And if you get a Net Promoter Score in the 50s and 60s, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So here's what this company did. They basically, they wanted all their senior executives to focus on NPS as a measure of customer centricity. And so they gated their bonuses. The bonuses were based on strategic NPS, and strategic NPS at this company was measured this way. Every month, they would call 400 customers chosen at random and ask them the question, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend our brand to you? And that was their NPS. So here is how that NPS looked in the fiscal year 2012 to 2014 time period. And you can see the fall off at the end of 2013. This is where their bonuses were canceled. This company failed in its NPS at the end of the year, and they couldn't figure out why. So they came to me and they wanted to know what they could do to improve their NPS and ensure that it doesn't fall again. And I asked them, I said, well, what did the NPS of your competitors do during this time? And they said, why would we measure that? We're only interested in our NPS. I said, well, wait a minute. You're not measuring your competitors? You're not measuring a relative score relative to them? No, we're just measuring our own customers. We take our strategic NPS. So not having any competitive scores, they didn't interview anybody else's customers. I went to the Ministry of Finance and I pulled off the consumer confidence figures for the fiscal 12 to 2014 time period. And let me show you the consumer confidence in this country. Notice the similarity? If anything, the bonuses should have been accelerated because their NPS fell off way less than consumer confidence. Consumer confidence plummeted for some reason during this time. And yet NPS didn't fall nearly as much. So you have to measure I'm going to stop sharing now. You have to measure the subjective voice of customer opinions by ensuring that you normalize it versus your competitors. You have to normalize it versus different regions of your country or your territory, or different countries if you operate in multiple countries. Different cultures have different expectations. They have to measure it on expectations. On the other hand, there's another kind of data other than this interactive data. That's interactive data, voice of customers, surveys, and so forth. That's information directly from the customer. There's also observational data. Observational data is the data that you simply observe. You can observe how many complaints are filed. You can observe how many products were delivered late. You can observe what the product defect rate is off your assembly line. Okay? These are observational metrics. And it's observational metrics that have made the whole discipline of customer success management possible. Think about customer success management as a discipline. If you're a B2B software as a service company, you probably have a customer success management function where, your customers are using your applications on your system, on the cloud, and you can observe how they're using them. You can see which customers use which applications at what time. You can actually see what applications were activated in different ways. You can tell that only 50% of the sales force is actually interacting with the system, let's say, and you can use that information to help try to improve your customers' success with the program. You can counsel the managers, you can create products you can look at the laggards and the accelerants and try to teach them. You can create social pressure and so forth. That's called customer success management. Well, during the pandemic, you have a lot of work-at-home workers, okay? If I'm working at home on a computer that's tied into your cloud, you should be having an employee success management function. You should try to ensure that I'm successful as an employee by giving me advice on best practices and showing me how other employees are doing this same thing. And you know what? I know that I work for you, therefore I'm not going to be offended about this. It's your system. You're just trying to make things better, and I need the help. So if I had one piece of advice that I would give you in weathering this pandemic is use it as an opportunity. It's an opportunity. This pandemic, this economic crisis presents one of the best opportunities you're ever going to have to re-engineer your business. Just make sure you do it in a customer-centric way. So, Anmol, back to you.
Sure. Thank you, Don. Thank you for sharing such amazing insights. I think it was a very valuable session. Thanks again for that. We have a lot of panelists who've joined us as well, special guests. So, folks, if you have questions, kindly unmute yourself and you could put that across to Don. And in some time, we will open the floor for questions to the audience as well. We have...
Anmol, probably you could just curate the panelist.
Sure.
You could, yeah, thank you.
Sure. So I'll quickly, give a quick introduction to our panelists. We have Sameer Arora. He's the president of Australia-India Business Council. We have Sudhir, who's the head CRM at Hyundai Motor India. We have Shreya, the principal associate, ICUL. And we have Mr. Mohammed Nasser, the director of the talk and executive director of BNI Coimbatore. We also have Sharon Malamed, the managing director of Matchboard Australia. So thanks again, folks, for joining in. So unmute yourself if you have a question.
Sure, I'd like to jump in. This is Sharon from Sydney, Australia. Just on the subject of NPS, obviously with the pandemic, a lot of call center agents have shifted to working from home and they may never return to their bricks and mortar environment. Is there any data around whether the NPS changes in that home working environment? Because it does strike me that the conversations are slightly different, perhaps more authentic in that home environment.
That's a great question, Sharon. Thank you very much. I don't have any data about it, unfortunately. Still a little bit too early. And my guess is your intuition, based on being close enough to your business, is probably right. I do think that we've all noticed the increasing amount of empathy that people have for at-home workers, for people who are out of work, let's say, temporarily, waiters and hair salon people, and they get our sympathy. And we also have empathy for our neighbors. Everybody's noticed that you have a friend that goes to pick up groceries for somebody who's in quarantine, let's say, that people do favors for others. And I do think that one good effect of the pandemic is it is fundamentally, while we have to distance ourselves socially, it's brought us closer together empathetically. And I do think that there is an important bond that's created in that way. And I think that what you might see in the work at home conversations is this immediate emotional connection between a consumer who's got to stay at home and has empathy for the work at home person who is just trying to keep their job and trying to hold things together and doing their best not to infect other people. I think there's, while I'm on the topic, I do a lot of talking. I speak around the world. I go all over the world. I give talks. And one of my main subjects is customer trust and empathy. I talk about the fact that having a deeper insight into your customers is no different than having empathy for customers. Now, empathy is the sincerest form of insight into what your customers need. Putting yourself in the shoes of the customers, trying to understand what it's like to be that customer. That's empathy. When I raise that topic, there are always a few raised eyebrows in the crowd. Mostly senior executives thinking, empathy is nice, but sales and profits, that you can count that. You can count the dollars, I think today, if the pandemic has taught us anything, it will have taught us that empathy is real. It is a rock solid, ironclad business strategy to empathize with your customers. I think making those emotional connections is very important. And you know what? If you can do it better with work at home, I wouldn't be surprised if after the pandemic is gone and buried, we'll have more work at home people, because you get more empathy that way. Good question. Thank you.
Hi, Don. This is Shreya here. Just had a follow-up question on that. So you mentioned empathy, but the sentiment right now is basically that if I can do it online, I will. So in this case, how do you reach out to new customers, and how do you reassure and give them confidence that we are good and you're good? So how do you do that?
Okay. I think you need to find ways of reaching out to customers and potential customers that relies more on the human connection, even though you make that human connection online. Let's put it this way. When I showed you the chart of most valuable customers and most growable customers and low maintenance customers, and I said with low maintenance customers, you need to automate and streamline, and you need to routinize things to reduce the cost to serve. But that may be the majority of your customers, but they're the lowest value customers. They're the bottom 70% of your customers that give you 30% of your business, okay? The top 30% of customers that give you 70% of your business, that's who you really want to focus on. And you need to reach those relationships. Shy away from a non-automated relationship with a high-value customer. But you probably should shy away from a non-automated relationship with a very low-value customer, or maybe even a below-zero customer, okay? Those customers are wasting your money. And it's not that they have bad intentions at all, and they're not, we shouldn't disrespect them. You should serve them as well as you can, but you can't afford to put all the resources there. And when you do assign resources there, you're depriving the very high-value customers who deserve those resources more, and are going to be more, they're going to create more value for you. You're going to get a higher return on your spending. So my suggestion is, in a work-at-home environment, one of the most important things is knowing which customers are indeed your most valuable customers and treating them that way.
Okay. If I could have another question.
Yes. Well,
yeah. So should organizations now factor in these sort of black swan events, and what are your suggestions on how do they factor in, and what can and should these organizations do?
Well, what's interesting is you as a business, you need to plan for unpredictability. If we could have foreseen this black swan event, it wouldn't be a black swan event, right? By definition, surprises are always going to happen, and we'll always be surprised. But there are ways to make your organization more resilient to these kinds of unfortunate surprises. One way is if you're in the financial business, don't be too leveraged. Okay, if you're very leveraged, if you owe a lot of money based on your relative to your assets, then you have very little flexibility. Another way, culturally, is you want your employees to all have a general agreement on the direction of success for your business. And if I were you, I would make sure that my direction of success isn't described in terms of profit and sales, but it's described in form of some sort of human benefit that we are delivering to the human race. This is what our purpose as a business is. We want to make a profit, but in order to achieve that purpose. If everybody knows the direction of success, then when you have these black swan events and things are in turmoil and nobody knows what to do next, then you'll see employees self-organizing. They'll organize by themselves to do it. You know, I can't do this with an online audience, but I used to demonstrate self-organization in an audience of people in a theater by saying, you can self-organize yourselves as an audience, and I'll show you how to do it. I'm going to turn my back, but I want you to start clapping. But I want you to clap in unison. So I turn my back and people start clapping, and it never takes more than 2 or 3 seconds for the whole audience to be clap, 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 or they'll be going clap, 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 clap. The point is, I didn't say how rhythmically to clap or what, I just said clap in unison. And every audience member is listening to other people. They know the direction of success is unison, okay, being in unison, okay? And there's lots of ways you can be in unison. But when I turn around, I say, look, there was no CEO in the front of the room saying clap, 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 clap. You did it yourselves. You want your employees to do that. I want to tell you one self-organizing story, all right? Roger Dow, this is one of my favorite stories of all time. Roger Dow was the president for marketing at Marriott Corporation for years. He told me that in the very early days of the database marketing era, he had a meeting with his IT people, and they had 430 some hotels in the United States. And he told his IT people that he wanted a database of customers sufficient so that if a customer was checking in a particular Marriott hotel in the US, and if they'd ever stayed at that Marriott before, he wanted the check-in clerk to know that, to be able to say, welcome back, sir. So you guys go out, figure out how to do this. So they came back to him like 2 weeks later, they did this big study. This is like 1998, 99, right? So 20 years ago. And they said, yes, sir, Mr. Dow, we can do this. It's going to take $1.5 million. It'll take us about 8 months, but we can get this database put in place. And he said, $1.5 million? You're kidding me? You're nuts. That's stupid. I'm not going to pay that kind of money. And he went off on a business trip. And he was staying in a Marriott in the Midwest that he had actually been at about 5 years previously, but he was going there this time to look at the new lobby treatments that the Marriott was putting in, new lobby treatments all over. And they was one of the first stores. They were pioneering this lobby treatment. So he pulled his car up, the bellman took his luggage, and he's walking through the lobby looking at the new treatment, and it's really nice treatment. And he goes up to the check-in desk, and the clerk looks him in the eye and says, welcome back, sir. He said, excuse me. I said, welcome back. You have been here with us before, haven't you, sir? Yes, I have, young man. You know who I am? I'm the president for marketing at this corporation, and my IT people say it takes $1 million to do what you just said. You better tell me how you knew I stayed here before. And the bellman, the check-in clerk was very nervous, but he looked around and said, sir, I hope I didn't offend you, but when you gave your luggage to the bellman, he took your luggage and he asked you if you stayed here before. And you must have said yes, because he put the luggage down, he looked at me, he went like that, and that means you stayed here before. So I said, welcome back. That's an example of self-organization. You want your employees to be able to do that kind of self-organizing.
That's an interesting input. Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
Don, this is Nasir from BNI, and when we are trying to get so empathized with our customers at this point of time, and we have a sales team, and we are now getting out of the locked out situation slowly, and we want to go back to our customers. And how can one ask business to our customers at this point of time?
I think that the best appeal to customers at this point in time is one that we're in this together. And you know what? And if you don't have a community strong enough to be able to make that appeal to a lot of customers, then one of your tasks before the next crisis is to build that community, to try to help your customers understand that we're all in this together. We're just trying to help you solve your problem, meet your need. What does BNI do, by the way?
BNI is a networking organization where we help each other to grow our businesses. That's individually, each one of us are representing our own businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I'm asking about not in terms of BNI as such, but I'm asking about individual business houses. See, say for example, I'm into the business of event marketing, exhibition, trade booth designing, consulting, and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So my own sales team, they are right now so down, and their morale is down, and some of the businesses that we represent is not in the essential category. So how do we go and ask a customer business at this point of time? Is this
Yeah. Oh, I get it. Yeah. How do your members do? How do your members do that? Right.
Yeah.
I think you have to tiptoe around the issue of money and business. And to the extent possible, if I were running a business today, I would be telling my salespeople to try to go to the meeting with something of clear value to the customer, even if they don't buy. Something, not a gift, but some piece of information, some insight, some advice, some help, some intelligence, let's say. And I want to give that stuff away, and give it away until a customer is comfortable that they can rely on me, or maybe until a customer realizes they can't do business without me anymore, and then at that point you can begin to charge. I think a good strategy for most businesses today is to try to put themselves in a position in the customer's mind as being a more objective defender of the customer's interest, and a representative of the problem that the customer is trying to solve, or the need that the customer is trying to meet, in a way that you can actually, when it is appropriate, you can even refer a customer to one of your direct competitors occasionally. At Peppers and Rogers Group, we used to do that all the time. If an assignment came into us and we thought that Price Waterhouse or McKinsey would do a better job or was better equipped to do it, we recommend them to our customers. And McKinsey would never do that for us, but we had a lot higher trust, and our customers had a lot higher trust in us than they had in even McKinsey. And it was primarily because if we would recommend a customer to McKinsey because that was the right thing for the customer, then when we recommend that they come with us, that must be the right thing also. I think that's a strong position, where you're constantly sort of trying to bring the customer real value, whether the customer buys from you or not. And in the middle of this economic downturn, you're not going to get sales by haranguing people or calling them multiple times. You're going to get sales by tiptoeing into their offices and convincing them that they can trust you with their lives. That's how you're going to get sales, I think.
Thank you, Don.
Sure.
Sure. So value first, sales later. Thank you for sharing that, Don. We'll move to some of the questions which our audience has today. We have a question from Gabriel. He is saying, how should CX professionals show their financial relevance to the business during the pandemic? I think this is
good point. Yep. Good point. It's going to be hard because during the pandemic, the value of all your customers is going to decline because they're going to be less and less willing to buy. They're going to need less. When people stay at home, there's much less demand. It's a demand crisis as well as a supply crisis. I think the best way for a customer experience person to show their value to the company is to show a customer-oriented plan for husbanding your resources during the pandemic, during the shutdown, during the economic downturn, and resurging once the downturn dissipates. When we finally do get through this black swan event, and we will get through it sooner or later. We'll get through it sooner or later. You need a plan, the way I outlined in my presentation, that focuses on reactivating your most valuable customers, and maybe even trimming down your least valuable. Let me give you an example. I'll give you an example. take an airline, okay? Let's say I'm Delta Airlines, and the shutdown in the United States is lifting, let's say, and people are coming back on the airplanes. Well, what I want to do is for my most valuable customers, and of course I know who those most valuable customers are because I've tracked them with the freaking flyer programs. I know who the big spenders are. I know who always buys business class, and I know who upgrades themselves with their own points to business class. Those are two different types of business traveler. The one type, their business class is paid by the client or by their company. The other one, they have to buy their own business class and they use mileage, certificates to do that. Well, I give them two different kinds of awards. For the customer who buys business class, I give them double or triple mileage for the first month or so to let's get your business back. But for the person who always upgrades themselves, I give you double or triple miles. I give you free upgrade for buying Coach for the first 2 months. A free upgrade. And so I guess what I'm saying is you have to make customer specific strategies for specific customers, and you have to think about those customers, and that's a significantly useful plan for coming out of an economic downturn, because focusing on your best customers first, that's nothing more, that's smart growth. It's a smart investment. It's not a dumb investment. It's smart.
Sure. Don, I have a question. You spoke about super growth customers. In this era of the pandemic, do you think there'll be customer poaching? So there'll be a lot of companies vying for the same customers, and they'll try to outdo each other to get them. So is this going to go into?
I don't think but I don't think it's any different than outside the pandemic. I don't think people are going to be panicked at trying to acquire new customers any more than they're. The answer to your question is probably no. Okay, I don't think it's going to be any different competition for super growth or most valuable customers than otherwise. I think there are going to be some competitors who are smarter than others, who are more knowledgeable about their customer base and the mix of customers that they're facing and their customer needs. I only had 30 minutes, so I didn't talk about the very important issue of differentiating customers by their needs, okay? As in the airline, the business class buyer and the business class upgrader, let's say, just those are two different types of needs that those customers need. Offer each different customer based on what they need. What the customer needs from you, that's the inverse of what the customer is worth to you. They're both sides of the value proposition. What the customer needs and what you need, what problem he wants solved and what money you want, okay? That's both sides. You can't motivate the customer by telling him his value. You can only motivate the customer to action by understanding the customer's needs directly. So you focus on your most valuable customers and you differentiate them by their needs in order to treat different customers differently and each customer as relevantly as possible.
Sure. We have a question from Annie. She's put up an interesting scenario. Alice and Bob are friends. Both have planned to buy X branded shirt. Alice bought from the store for $500. Bob bought the same shirt online for $450 after the discount. Alice was disappointed in this case. So how do businesses, how can they retain both customers?
So if Alice feels let down and they bought it from the same company, and if I were that company, I would match the price for Alice. I wouldn't bat an eye. On the other hand, if I'm the competitor and I successfully charged Alice more than you charged Bob, let's say, I'm $50 richer. Then I ought to view that as good fortune, and I ought to be able to share a little of that good fortune with this customer and maybe give them a coupon for later if she feels offended or if what. And you know what? If it depends on how aggressive the retail market is, but it wouldn't surprise me to see some retailers say, hey, we'll match your online price, just show us the receipt. You already see a lot of retailers doing that, and they don't really have a choice. They've got to do it sooner or later, or got to go out of business.
Sure. We have a question from Rajiv. Rajiv is saying, do you see a radical change in customer behavior of traditional or conservative customers from largely touch and feel to other types of buying approaches? If yes, will this approach be the new normal, or will they revert back to the old ways of buying?
I think we'll revert back to the old ways of buying, and I think it'll be relatively the same. I don't think we're at a new normal. We're just accelerating into the future. Okay, we are accelerating our adoption of technology because of this meeting, because of all the work at homes, because of the Mother's Day celebration I had with my daughter and her kids online. I think we are accelerating into the future. I think the technology will get better and better. Let me give you an example of one of the problems with Zoom. I teach a class at Menlo College, and I teach another one at Stanford University. And those classes have gone online. The biggest drawback of being a teacher or a presenter in an online group is in a classroom or in an auditorium, when I have an audience, I can look at the audience and I can tell who is looking at me. And if I look you in the eye, all right, I'm looking at you. And that's very important for a teacher and a student, but it's impossible to do online. I'm looking everybody in the eye right now. I'm right there, I'm looking right at you, but I'm not, I'm looking at the camera, okay? So and I'm looking at everyone, not just any particular person. I can't single it out. So I think that sort of personality, it wouldn't surprise me to see a technology, to see Zoom or Microsoft Teams or somebody else come up with technology where the camera you're looking at, the feed is artificially changed to show who you're looking at on your screen at some point in the future. There'll be, but I think this technology is accelerating, and I think we've been catapulted into a future that is inevitable, but it won't be less human. It'll be much more human than it is today. Today we're inhibited. We can't meet face to face. But I do think that we'll go back to normal sooner or later. If it's 6 months from now or a year and a half from now, sooner or later we'll go back to normal.
Sure. We also have Mr. Prabhu from ITF. So if you have a question, yes, feel free to unmute yourself and shoot. And while you do that, we have questions from few of them. We have from Shanmati and Hari. I think both of them are asking pretty much the same thing. Is this a good time to be an entrepreneur, someone who's just starting off his business?
Wow. Well, look on the bright side. It's not far down, okay? You don't have a lot to lose being an entrepreneur right now. I think it's tough, but I certainly don't think it's impossible. There's a lot of money out there looking for good investment. So there's that. I think it depends on the type of business you want to launch and the type of idea you have, and of course your energy and stick-to-itiveness.
There's never a shortage for money, when it comes to good products or services, right?
No. That's the point. There's no shortage of people who want to make money off a good idea.
Right. Great. We have a question from Christophe. Do you agree that companies which are not able to sell anymore because of the pandemic should increase their R&D efforts, probably review their go-to-market planning, using more innovation and creativity? Is this the time for more pull marketing?
I definitely think it's a time for more innovation. Companies and organisms are complex adaptive systems, okay? Beehives and companies are similar. A complex adaptive system is a system that persists over time by exploiting resources it has and also exploring for additional resources. And both things have to happen for the system to survive. A beehive has bees going out and foraging for nectar from new flowers, distant flowers. At the same time, they have bees making honey from the nectar they have, right? A company makes money off the products it can sell today, but it constantly has to look outside. And the thing is, exploration and exploitation both have to happen for a company or an organism to survive over the long term, because why? The environment is constantly changing. So if a bear steals my honey, I've got to have access to more flowers. I got to know where to go to get more flowers, okay? And if a competitor suddenly comes up with a technology that outdates your business model, you got to know where to go also. So you constantly have to be exploring your territory to understand what the innovative opportunities are and to discover those opportunities. Exploration is about discovery. And I think in a crisis like this, discovery is more important than ever before, because nobody, probably many of the businesses on this call, their business models are sincerely threatened right now. Your business is in a downturn. It's not going to get better for a while. It's tough. So you should be exploring the whole territory now, because this is a as somebody said earlier, it's a black swan event, and you're there now, and you've got to get through it. Okay, exploration, innovation, discovery.
Sure. Don, many people on the group right now, they've just started their business. They don't really have a structured way to measure customer experience or customer success. So how can they get started in this journey of actually measuring what their customers are feeling?
Okay. Remember the story I told you about NPS and customer satisfaction scores. They're relative. And so whenever you're measuring your customer satisfaction for the whole company, when you want to get a gauge of the whole company, you got to keep in mind a couple things. You have to have sampling that is unbiased and statistically reliable, and you should have an analyst help you with that, okay? If you have a universal survey, like if you ask everybody who buys something, would you rate this call, would you rate this interaction? Those universal surveys are basically worthless for gauging the average sentiment, because what happens is most people don't respond, don't want to participate, and you get the 2% of people who are really ticked off or really, really pleased. So it's like a dumbbell effect. So, however, what universal surveys are useful for is what I call complaint discovery. 9 out of 10 people who have a complaint don't tell you. And so when you have a survey and you ask everybody, were you okay? Then at least you get some of the complaints that you wouldn't have otherwise got. But then you have to follow up on those complaints. So one of the most important aspects in terms of improving the customer experience is constant following up on complaints and fixing the problem systemically. Every complaint gives you an opportunity to improve your overall service, your overall delivery. So complaint discovery is a really good mechanism. Don't confuse the universal survey of voice of customer with some projectable metric, because it's not, okay? What the telecom company was doing was they were calling 400 customers at random, chosen at random, but they were statistically representative, and they gave them like a benefit of some kind. They get like 80% participation rate on the survey. That makes it more valid, okay? If I survey 400 customers chosen at random and 80% participate, that's a much more valid picture of my overall service level than 1 million customers asked and only 0.5% participate. See what I'm saying? Because that 0.5% will be biased. So there's a lot of issues involved, and I would talk to an analyst about how to do this, because some of them are statistical issues. But fundamentally, it's common sense. You get the voice of your customer, you monitor your observational metrics, and by the way, you can observe what people do on your website. You can observe their mouse tracks on your website. There's technologies that do that. You can observe how many people click through your ad or click through from one page, or how many go to this page twice and then quit your site. All those are signals. Somebody needs to be paying attention to those individual customer signals. Great.
Thank you so much for taking time out. I believe this this whole webinar has been a great learning experience for all of us.